be paying thousands and thousands of dollars more over the next 30 years to finance the next 2 months worth of payroll tax holiday. Why was the payroll tax holiday talked about in the first place? It was about jobs. It was about economic opportunity. It was about people who believed that this could lead to better economic opportunity. What we've talked about with the Keystone Pipeline is jobs and better economic opportunity. It fits in the same conversation about getting this country back on its feet and working again. And so if people want to say the payroll tax holiday is about our economy, and I believe giving more money back to people is good, then they have to admit then that the pipeline, which would also get people back to work, good paying salaries, 100,000 jobs, is also a good thing. Yes?
I want to thank you for your service, Cory. I appreciate the job you're doing. But when I go to bed at night, I still have the feeling that Senator Reid not only controls the Senate, but he has a lot of power over the House, and that disturbs me. Do you see any scenario in the future where the House can put together a package to block his power and the influence that he has in our government?
You know, I mean, the Senate and the House, both of them are required to approve something before it can become a law. The House has passed 28 jobs bills that are languishing in the Senate. They haven't been voted on in the Senate. January 24th marks the day. It's the State of the Union, so mark your calendars. January 24th marks the 1,000th day since the Senate has passed a budget. 1,000 days since they passed a budget. So, I mean, the House obviously can't do anything to the powers of the Senate unless they passed a bill to do it and the Senate agreed to it. So, and the President signed it. So, I mean, and I think there'd be some significant constitutional questions about whether the House can even do that in the first place because of the balance of powers and separation of the branches. So, again, though, what happens, we present jobs bill after jobs bill to the Senate, and they stack up and pile up. One of them is my HR 2021. Luckily, they were able to deal with it through other permit approval processes and got it going again. But, you know, I mean, the Senate, 1,000 days since they passed the budget. Got time for a few more questions. Yes, sir.
I didn't think you accepted responsibility for not funding Social Security and just taking the money away from it. Maybe you did, but...
Well, I won't accept because that's not what I did, so I won't accept responsibility for that because that's not what I did.
I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about another policy issue that I'll admit you won't find a lot of people that will agree with me on it, but it's about water and water policy. And for 30 years, I helped farmers all around the world grow several times as much food on half as much water as they were using. And I kept being told by all the international experts that that was a waste of effort because it didn't save any water. And in Colorado, that simple idea is embedded in the idea that the state requires farmers to use the standard amount of water on their farm because they assume any excess water either flows back to the river or goes underground and goes to the river. So either way, any excess water goes back to the river. In reality, when I got to thinking about it, I decided that was a bad policy. And I looked into it very carefully and determined that, and this has to be from specific studies, not generalizations, but I've looked generally many places, 80% or more of the water that is assumed to go back to the river doesn't go because it evaporates before it gets there. So that water that is assumed to go back doesn't. And the water that goes underground in area after area that I've looked at becomes so saline that it's unusable for irrigation and can only be used because of the water coming down the river is used to dilute it. So that assumption that 100% goes back to the river is erroneous. But that's the basis of Colorado law. And there's the opportunity, because in study after study around the world, including some specific valleys in Colorado, farmers are operating on the order of about a 25% efficiency.
Well, I think.
Now that means that we really have a lot of water if we would manage it like they do in Israel. We would have a very adequate water supply for both, weather change and increases in population and increases in different uses and that kind of thing. But it's not understood, and the state still continues their policy of requiring farmers to waste water. They're violating their own law.
Well, he left. I was going to say, when it comes to Colorado water law, you don't want federal legislators rewriting Colorado water law. But Kevin Lundberg, I was going to refer you to Kevin Lundberg, who can address any questions on the specifics of Colorado water law. And that's...
This is an important issue in terms of what you do about water.
Yeah. And from agriculture, we sell farm equipment, the family business, and the advancements that have been made in conservation is incredible. Using strip till technologies, the fallowing technologies, the 5-year rotation that used to be you grow wheat, you go off a year, you grow wheat, you go off a year, and now you're shifting to a rotation that involves millet and corn and wheat. It's just an incredible rotation that people are able to use to keep nutrients in the soil, keep moisture in the soil. So, I don't want to get too far into it, because I think changes to state water law are best dealt with at the state and should only be at the state. You don't want the federal government changing Colorado water law. But I understand what you're saying. I appreciate your points. Thank you. One more question. Yes, ma'am.
Cory, I think the reason Kevin left was he knew.
Oh, there he is. We were just talking. Oh, come back here. Nice to see how you are.
I wanted to ask you, the question was raised about raising political contributions. And one of the things that I think has become an anachronism is a 2-year term for congressmen. And I've been advocating maybe a term limit of 3 4-year terms for congressmen, 2 6-year terms for Senate. Would having a couple of more years in your term help on this, just continuously having to raise?
The question comes up a lot, and if anybody heard the question, it was whether we should do something different. Basically, if I understand the question right, is that should we do something different than 2 years of time for members of the House? And the answer is absolutely not. I don't think we should, and here's why. In 2008, there was a wave election. Republicans were voted out of office because people felt they didn't do what they were supposed to do. In 2010, there was a wave election. Democrats were voted out of office because the people felt they didn't do what they sent them there to do. 2 years, the House of Representatives is the closest body to the people of this country. If we don't do what's right, if we don't do what's in the best interest of the American public, they're going to send us home. And that's why I don't think that you ought to extend the time for members of the House. But thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you very much for your questions. And thank you, Northern, for letting us use the facility. Thanks, Eric. Thanks.
How's that?
He's doing great. Thank you.
I had a new grandson 12 days ago.
Oh, congratulations to you. Now, call me at 3 in the morning. We can talk. Hey, thanks for your question. Nice to see you again. Good to see you. We did, yes, 9 weeks ago. You got it. Yep, 9 weeks ago. John Thatcher. John Thatcher. How are you? Good. How are you? Good to see you. Everything well? Yep.